Um, Welcome back to the Junkie Sports Podcast today. Today we're going to do part two of our little mini series on going through all the teams that did not make the playoffs and kind of saying what do they need to do this offseason? Is it personnel changes? Is it in the draft, free agency, trades? What do they need to focus on? We're going to go through all that. If you haven't listened to it yet, go ahead, listen to part one, which is about all the teams in the Eastern Conference that didn't make the playoffs. And then today we're going to do those teams in the West. So let's go ahead and kick it off. The first team we got is that 15th seed in the Western Conference, the Golden State Warriors. Davis, what are you doing this offseason?
If you would have told me at the beginning of the season that the Warriors would end up being the last team in the West, I would have told you you're crazy. But this, injuries are unpredictable. They happen. And so, it's kind of like – it reminds me a little bit of the whole Tim Duncan just Spurs situation where they had kind of already had their dynasty going with David Robinson. And then, they have that one bad season. They tanked a little bit, and they ended up getting Tim Duncan and resetting their franchise to be good for the next X amount of years. So this is a kind of similar situation, in my opinion. Obviously injuries, like I said, are unpredictable, but they were dealt the hand that they got, and they kind of ended up tanking. And that's fine. They were able to learn a lot from the young players and the role players that they have on the team that don't normally get as much playing time. And that's valuable information that the Warriors can use for the future, and kind of focusing in on, some of those other guys. And obviously with the trade to get Wiggins for the D'Angelo Russell, that was a big deal. And I don't know if the Warriors are going to be moving away from Wiggins, like in this whole like free agency / like trade period that's going to be coming up on us. I really think that Wiggins can add an extra dimension to this offense. And I know that he's had kind of some problems in the past, but he's still been a very good player. Yes, he has, high usage rates, has kind of been the guy. And a lot of that came with his expectations coming into the league, but he's still blossomed into a very good player. And this last year too, especially, he's focused more on the defensive side of things. And that bodes well for the future of him trying to stay in the league as long as possible. But I don't know how much I want to talk about the Warriors, because I think kind of how things are going to end up shaking out. They're going to be right up there as, 1 through 3 seed in the West. I mean, obviously they're getting Steph and Clay back. You never know with injuries kind of how they're going to be able to come back and be able to perform. My biggest hope in terms of, if they do want to get one of the top 3 seeds in the West next season, they need to be getting more from Draymond Green. And I understand that last season he was kind of taking a backseat role, trying to develop these guys in the locker room and in the practices, and get them to buy into the Warriors mentality, so that when Steph and Clay come back, they're able to kind of transition seamlessly. But he did regress as a player this past season, and so I think if they're wanting to get through that 1 through 3 seed in the West, they need to be making sure that he doesn't regress further, and that they're able to get that next level of production out of him that we've kind of come to expect in the past.
Yeah, I kind of agree. There's not a ton of talk about here with the Warriors. I mean, they're going to be a title contender next year, injuries aside. My big thing for them, I think Andrew Wiggins can fit the roster. I believe Steve Kerr is going to make it work. Steph will make it work without a doubt. But ideally, I'd love to see them take Andrew Wiggins in that 2 pick and just go get somebody that just fits perfectly with this roster. I'm not saying it would work, but I've said this trade multiple times, especially on this podcast. If they could get Ben Simmons, this team would be beyond disgusting, because Ben Simmons covers Steph's weaknesses and Steph covers Ben Simmons' weaknesses. And this team would be beyond disgusting if they could do that. And so that's who I'd love to see him go after. I don't know if that would happen. I don't know what direction the 76ers plan on going this year. But at the end of the day, I do fully expect them to kind of trade away that number 2 pick. We'll end up seeing what they kind of get in return for that if that gets packaged with Andrew Wiggins. But I mean, Andrew Wiggins, I mean, he averages like 25 a game. I mean, he could put the ball in the hoop. He's a great scorer. I just think the Warriors are going to need to really just focus on filling up their roster, the bench a little bit, just picking up some nice pieces for the bench, which I fully expect them to do because in free agency this offseason, people are going to be like, well, I want to go win a ring. Let's go sign with the Warriors because that's what people did for 4 years. And so I fully expect the Warriors to be back there next year. I'm very interested, and I'll be very in tune to see how they kind of go about with that number 2 pick and what sort of trade options and trade rumors sort of develop with that. I think that'll be really fun to watch and stuff.
I wouldn't be surprised if the Knicks try to go after that draft pick.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if they go for that number 2, they're going to be taking LaMelo Ball.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't think the Warriors, obviously, I mean, their roster composition compared to a lot of the teams picking early in the draft, they can afford to, trade picks and go down a little bit and still pick someone that's going to be impactful for them for whatever they want. And I think if they're able to potentially get Mitchell Robinson in that trade as well, that'd be nice. Huge for them. Maybe they'd have to give up an Eric Pascal or, I don't know, maybe even Marquise Chris or someone to try to, bait the Knicks to kind of giving up Mitchell Robinson, because I think Mitchell Robinson, as we discussed on the last episode, is, one of the guys that the Knicks probably really don't want to get rid of unless they're getting something a lot better in return, which I think for them, more, I don't know, they kind of got screwed in the lottery a little bit, which, it happens. That's why it's called a lottery. It's unpredictable. But I still think they have aspirations to try to pick high in this draft and continue on that, that trajectory of getting and acquiring young players and trying to, get their time frames to match up. And I don't know. I just think that's a team that could definitely be looking to trade up for that Warriors pick.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move up into the 14th seed in the West. We got the Minnesota Timberwolves. So what are you going to be doing this offseason, Davis?
So I think, honestly, I know that they've, been kind of slotted with picking Anthony Edwards first overall, but I also would not be surprised if they look to trade that pick. I know, if you're given the first overall pick, and especially if it's not kind of, didn't really see it coming, especially how the lottery ended up shaking out, sure, ride with it. But at the same time, I think this team is going to be in a little bit of trouble if they just pick up Anthony Edwards in terms of trying to make the playoffs next season. I understand that D'Lo and Cat are now together, after all this talk of, wanting to play together for a long time. But, some of the pieces around them aren't necessarily that great. And so I think they could use trading away that first pick to try to develop a little bit deeper of a roster and get more role players to kind of go alongside those guys. I think Josh Okogie is actually, one of the better little bright spots on their team in terms of like potential player development. He's kind of thrived in his role this last season. Jarrett Culver, I know their coach had kind of made some comments in the last week or two about how he's, a bust and like some of this type of stuff. But it's just his first season. You can afford to wait a couple seasons and kind of see how it ends up turning out. But I don't think they should be giving up on Jarrett Culver this early. And if the entire ownership and the front office think that, he's a bust after one season and we should move on from him, they should be exploring trades for him, because I think there's a lot of teams that would absolutely aren't giving up on Jarrett Culver at this point and would still like to get him. So I don't know. I definitely think they need a lot more depth to this roster to be able to kind of compete for a playoff spot. I don't think D'Lo and Cat by themselves are going to be able to get into the playoffs without some external help.
I kind of disagree with you a little bit there with something just at the end. I think D'Lo and Cat are plenty talented and good enough to take a team to the playoffs, but I think it's on them as individuals to play better. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but they are excellent players in my opinion. it's more of a mindset thing. I mean, Karl-Anthony Towns has had his histories of just not being a very competitive and driven player. They've had his issues with Jimmy Butler, and Jimmy Butler calling him out and calling him weak and that sort of thing. And I think they just need Karl-Anthony Towns to sort of just flip the switch and wake up and say, you know what, I want to compete in the playoffs. And I think it's on their superstars right now. I think their roster, I mean, they put up a lot of points. They have 3 20-point scorers. I mean, I know D'Lo's a little limited there. But, I mean, they have Malik Beasley averaging 20 points a game. They've got nice pieces on this roster. It's kind of like really mind-boggling about how bad they are. Because if you look at their roster and look at some of the numbers and stats they put up, you're like, oh, this team's aced easily in the West, easily. And the West is more competitive. But then, like, you just go in and you're like, okay, what's the issues? They're not efficient. They don't play great defense. Their leader is Karl-Anthony Towns. He doesn't go in and set the tone for this roster. Their culture is so bad. And I think that's what they need to really, really focus on in this offseason is just developing this very competitive and tenacious culture and environment, sort of that Heat culture, but really just like focusing on, hey, let's go in every night and we're going to try and dominate and kill our opponent. And I don't get that vibe from Cat. I think that's why he's had his issues in the past. But if they're able to do that, I fully expect this to be a good team. I think D'Lo and Cat can work really well together. I think they got players they can develop. That's what I'm looking for. Is I just need them to really just come out and want it. They need to have that mindset to say, you know what, we want to make the playoffs. I'm sick and tired of losing, and that's what I need to see out of them.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think they are. You don't need much more than 2, like really good players to be able to get your team in the playoffs. And I understand that, but it's also in the West, which is why, I'm in the belief that they aren't going to make the playoffs because there's a lot of younger teams that, were kind of on the fringe and are going to probably continue developing and be fighting for those last couple spots. And a lot of the teams besides probably the Thunder that made it last season aren't going to be going anywhere either. And so if they're making it into the playoffs and we're saying the Warriors are making it into the playoffs, who are the Timberwolves going to be knocking out and who's not going to be making the playoffs?
And that's a fair point. And I agree, like the West is so competitive, but I mean, they have 3 20-point scorers on their team. Like that is a big deal. And I just think it's the culture. That's the issue. They said they have the talent to succeed. They have the talent to go out and win games. I do agree the West is competitive. It's very unlikely they're going to make the playoffs. I don't expect them to. But I think to make the playoffs, that's where their focus needs to be is on creating an environment for success. And I think that's what they need to do because they're plenty talented enough to get there. I just think they don't want it bad enough, and there's other teams that want to make the playoffs and compete. I just don't think they want it that bad. At the end of the day, I think Karl-Anthony Towns is in the NBA for a check, not to win titles. And so if he wants to turn that around, he needs to change his mindset, and that works from him down. If he sets that tone, I think everyone else follows.
Some of those Clippers pieces that might be available for trades, and also a guy that I really think would help this team significantly would be Robert Covington. If they're able to kind of vie him away from the Rockets. Obviously, without D'Antoni, without Daryl Morey, the Rockets are going to be looking to kind of shake up that roster to some aspects. And, Robert Covington is kind of the bread and butter of that whole micro ball and whatnot. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking to, shop him around a little bit. And I think, obviously we've talked about their defensive struggles and them trying to buy in. Robert Covington is not only a veteran, but is someone that brings that level of energy every single night onto the floor, locked down on the best defender or on the best, he defends the best player any given night and, can kind of help kind of reset that culture in my opinion. And is someone that if I'm, the front office or the ownership for the Timberwolves, I'd be going after him very heavily.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think there's just some of the smaller pieces they need to go and lower those just tenacious, hardworking, grinded out guys. I think that's going to help just develop that culture and really try and get them to improve significantly. Because, 19-45 is the record this year. That's underachieving for what they are. They should not be there. They should be in that ninth, maybe 10th seed. They should have been one of the teams in the bubble trying to fight for a playoff spot. They're talented enough to do that, and it's their culture. They don't want it enough, and so I think that's what they need to do to get there.
That's why I also really worry about Anthony Edwards going there if they end up selecting him, because I know he's had some kind of like, I don't know, like draft like weaknesses, or like one of the biggest like concerns with him is just his motor and his like willingness to, you know, go in and commit at practice every day, and, you know, give it his best every given night. And so I think if they're picking Anthony Edwards, like, yes, he's a talented player with upside. That's why he's, you know, slotted as potentially the first overall pick. But in terms of their culture and what they're trying to, you know, potentially help like shape the future of this team, I don't know if he's really the answer for them. And that's why I think, you know, he's kind of a trap if for them specifically. I think Anthony Edwards is able to go to a different team. He might be able to have more success in the league, but if they end up selecting him, I just really don't necessarily see him kind of like panning out like they would kind of perceive that he might.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a good point. I mean, if I'm getting drafted by the T-Wolves, I'm in the middle of like, are you kidding me? Like, really? I have to go there? Like, I mean, at least in New York, for the Knicks, you're like, at least you're in New York. I think the T-Wolves culture so similar to the New York Knicks. It's just a history of consistent terribleness, if that's the word. Consistent terribleness. They're not there to win, and if you want to win, you gotta want it, and I don't see that out of them. And so, yeah, I agree. I think Anthony Edwards, if he goes there, is his career going to get wasted away. I really want him to go to a team that he can excel and thrive in and sort of have that role where he can develop. Because if he goes there, he's going to be, at best, a fourth option. I mean, that's not what you're looking for your number one pick. You're looking for him to really develop and become your franchise player. So let's go ahead and hop into the 13th seed in the West, the New Orleans Pelicans. So I know they have the GOAT Zion Williamson, but other than that, Davis, what sort of changes you making this offseason?
So they've already made a coaching change that just got announced very recently. Stan Van Gundy is going to be going in there. Obviously, he had a big track record with the Orlando Magic in the past, and something that, you know, he brings to that franchise that they've kind of underachieved these last couple of seasons with is their defense. And I understand that, you know, obviously they're a lot different defensively with Zion on the court than whenever he's not playing. But even still, I think Zion he didn't live up to the hype in terms of his defensive production.
I would agree.
This season, in terms of what he was doing on the offensive end, that's a different story. But, you know, he was dominating people in college. And I understand there's, you know, smaller guys and not guys that are, you know, committed to their body and, you know, aren't as physical. Just the game style is a little bit different. And so he was able to, you know, kind of showcase some of his skills in the college setting, but they haven't necessarily been able to translate. And someone like Brandon Ingram that, you know, has had some, you know, defensive kind of flashes in the past with the Lakers, and is a guy that should be locking down guys any given night, you know, with his physical attributes. I think Stan Van Gundy is a guy that, you know, he's always been very expecting the most defensively from any team that he's coaching. And I think from that aspect, he's a good sign for them. I do think there were other potential candidates that they could have gone with that could have helped unlock another level to their offense. But in terms of, you know, trying to build a culture of defense with a team that has such, you know, defensive capabilities, they've just been underperforming in that area, especially a guy like even Jackson Hayes or, you know, I mean, we don't know what Drew Holiday is going to be doing this offseason. But like, I don't know. I don't think, I mean, obviously they just picked up Zion Williams and have a bunch of potential like young guys that they're able to move forward with and kind of build around. So they're not really in a full panic mode here. They're obviously wanting to make the playoffs next season. That's a big reason, Alvin Gentry got fired because, they had the easiest schedule and they're kind of in the bubble specifically to try to vie for that last slot and try to go against LeBron and do a little changing of the airs or whatever for the NBA. But he didn't get him there and they looked horrible in the bubble. But I don't know. They're still not a team though that I think should be panicking a whole lot around. Just in general, I think now that they have a new head coach that's a little bit more reliable and has been a little bit more proven in the NBA, hopefully they're able to get more consistency and, commit to developing these young players to get the most out of what they can potentially bring in a given night.
Yeah. So I'm going to first start off by talking a little bit about Zion. I want to go one step further than something you said. Defensively, I didn't think he didn't meet the hype. I thought he was horrendous. I watched all of his games this year. He was terrible. I mean, he was terrible at defense. The one thing he does well on defensively, did it well in college, is weak side help. He's a great weak side shot blocker. But other than that, I mean, he's terrible. I don't understand how bad it is. The lateral quick is so not there. I think he needs to really work this offseason with the defensive coach and really try and focus on that end because offensively, it's just so natural to him. I mean, it's dude in 20 minutes can put up 24 points and you're like, what? Like you don't realize how fast this man can put up points, and he's terrible at the free throw line. Doesn't need the ball. I think offensively he's fine. Obviously, a player can always add to his game offensively, but he really needs to focus defensively and really do a lot better on that end. I didn't like the coaching decision. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was bad. Personally, I was really hoping they'd go get Jason Kidd because I think Jason Kidd would have really, really helped not only Lonzo Ball's game, but I think he would have connected better with these players and really I think he just would have done a better job coaching them. I think Van Gundy's a good coach. I just think I just think he's a little outdated for this team. I mean, this team is just so young and youthful. And I don't want to have any bias or anything against older coaches. I think older coaches can do a good job, but I just think Jason Kidd would have done a better job. But I do agree. I think Van Gundy is going to bring that defensive focus to this team, which they do desperately need. That's somewhere where they needed to focus. That's somewhere where they've been a little weak all year. But I think into the offseason, I think the biggest change there's one change, and I'm so 50-50 on it. And so, I'd love to hear what your opinion is on this because I really don't know. I think the priority for this team, and it is for most teams, but for this team specifically is I think they make the playoffs. I think the playoff experience is going to be so crucial to them. But the reason where I'm 50-50 is Drew Holiday does not fit the timeline of this team. And there's so many contenders that would love to have Drew Holiday on their team. I think the Pelicans could make a great trade, get a lot of pieces back that would fit this timeline way better. But I don't know how trading away Drew Holiday, if that's going to significantly decrease their chances of making the playoffs. And so one idea I was thinking about is what if they kept Drew Holiday now, see how they did up to the trade deadline. If they're just killing it and they're playing super well or whatever, maybe trade away Drew Holiday and say, hey, we can ride up the last half of the season. Maybe we do a little bit worse here and there, but hey, we're still going to make the playoffs. And then we can get these pieces that are going to better fit our roster, better fit our timeline, and then they can go get that playoff experience. Because I think that needs to be the focus for the next year. I want this team to get that playoff experience and see what that's like. I think it's going to help their development. But if they feel like if there's a package out there where they can get Drew Holiday off the roster and they get great pieces back, I'm all for it. Because I think Drew Holiday, I love watching him play. But, I mean, at the end of the day, that's not where this roster's at right now. They're so young. They're so youthful. And I also think getting Drew Holiday off the roster will allow Nickeil Alexander-Walker to get playing time because I'd love him to play a lot more than he does right now. I think he's a good player. I just think the younger guys kind of going and developing is a really key point. But at the same time, I don't want the focus to be on development as much as making the playoffs. I think that should be their top priority over letting all these other guys have opportunities.
Yeah, so kind of on those lines, I think, the front office has kind of made it clear with their decisions so far in the offseason that yes, making the playoffs was their priority. And because Alvin Gentry did not, get them there, that's why they moved on. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, especially with the guys like Brandon Ingram, Lonzo, and, Zion that really haven't had that playoff experience. Obviously they were on some bad Lakers teams. And then even when they got LeBron, they failed to make the playoffs. So none of those guys have had, playoff experience. Drew Holiday, I don't know if he has. He probably did it alongside Anthony Davis and
He
Boogie.
did, yeah. Yep.
But outside of that, like, I don't know. Like, it is tough because, like, the only problem with like waiting until the trade deadline to kind of make a decision on Drew Holiday is that after next season, he has a player option in his contract. But other than that, they're just kind of, getting someone that has, a 26, $27 million contract, which halfway through the season, a lot of people already have their payroll pretty figured out. And that's a larger contract to try to make work at the trade deadline. Not that they couldn't get it done, because I think any championship competing team or a team that's trying to make the playoffs last little push, whether it's the Magic or who knows, would be willing to try to get Drew Holiday on their team to kind of, make that final push. But also, I think they're, in terms of what they'd be able to get in return, they'd probably be able to maximize that if they trade him during the offseason before the season starts, just so teams can kind of, figure that into their payroll before the season starts to begin with. And also from there, kind of, develop their schemes and develop defensively as a unit throughout the season, alongside him, and not just kind of, because throwing in a piece after the trade deadline can be, it's something that teams do because they're, trying to, make that final push, but it doesn't always work out because, they can't like plan and see him play alongside the other players throughout the duration of the whole season and try to make it work around him as much as it is kind of like a last minute Hail Mary, which I don't know. I mean, it could work for the Pelicans, but I think if they're wanting to make the playoffs, they need to. I think they can make the playoffs either way if they keep Drew Holiday or, decide to get rid of him over this offseason. But if they, I think they have probably a higher possibility of making the playoffs if they trade him over the offseason so that they're able to kind of plan and see how they're, because what they're getting in return is, like you said, a lot of young players that can, try to develop alongside those guys and some good role players. And so, if they're able to kind of, if Stan Van Gundy is able to kind of know what he's getting into before the season starts and kind of, use the regular season to try to build them collectively as a unit and not kind of have it in the back of his mind that, okay, we might be moving away from Drew Holiday, if he gets us enough wins and we're kind of vying for that position so that we can then, kind of like reset and get the timeline working out. I just think that's kind of a flawed philosophy because you're not maximizing the value out of Drew Holiday. And if you're already planning on trading him, you should do it when you're getting the most value out of him.
Yeah, I think just seeing, and I think the fact that this free agency class is not that good is going to help push a lot of the trade market this offseason. And so I think the New Orleans trying to really just pursue any trades coming their way for Drew Holiday is a really good idea because I think for them to be able to go out and get some pieces is going to be really valuable. And I also want them to be pieces that are impact. I don't want them to be project players. I want them players that can be young, but I want them players that are good now. I want players that are going to come out and help push them to the playoffs. So that's what I'm going to be looking for whenever if they make this trade, I guess not win, but if they make this trade this offseason. So, but yeah, let's go ahead and hop into our next team. So we got the 13th seed, 12th seed in the West, the Sacramento Kings. What are you going to be doing, Davis?
I mean, I would have already fired Luke Walton personally. I don't know.
I don't blame you.
I don't know what they see in him, especially with how he handled his first season and changing the tempo so much with this team that already had a lot gelling. They were one of the teams that, was expected to make the playoffs and expected to continue to, progress as a team. And then they hired Luke Walton. He changed things and they took a big step down. Even some like controversy around starting Buddy Hield, not, having him come off the bench. He just had a lot of bad decisions, in my opinion. And, good for them, I guess, for sticking by him and having faith in whatever he was pitching in his job interview of how they can become a better team down the line. They obviously, their front office must believe in him one way or the other, but I don't think his players do. I really don't. And that's a hard sell, to try to get your players to buy into a coach that they already don't like. It just doesn't work out. Like, it didn't work out with the Cavs and Jim Beeline. It didn't work out with or John Beeline. And it didn't work out with the Bulls, and Jim Boylan. Like, it just doesn't work out if the players don't buy in, because you don't see them, committing as much to the entire system that, if they're able to buy into the system and Luke Walton has a good system, then yeah, sure, maybe they'd be okay. But if the players aren't willing to make that commitment because they don't believe in their coach and the coach's vision, then it's just not going to work out. It's not. And although they have a lot of really good pieces, they probably at this point, if I'm just going to say, like, I'm going to go through the rest of my dialogue, assuming that Luke Walton is going to be their coach next season. I'll say they should probably get rid of Buddy Hield. And there's a lot of teams that could probably be looking to get him, especially, I think the Miami Heat could be a good little source for Buddy Hield to kind of end up. But there's a lot of teams that would like to have Buddy Hield. And I think also Buddy Hield could be packaged with another player, or not another player, but to try to get them to move up in the draft potentially. I think he's an easy way for them to do that, because anyone that's trying to switch spots with them would absolutely want someone in return. I think Buddy Hield is one of the guys that they just don't want in the locker room at this point, especially just because they don't know, he thinks he should be starting. They don't think he should be starting at this point. So, there's already, some of that internal conflict that he's kind of creating by being on their roster. So I don't expect him to be on the team next year. I just hope that they can be getting something, some draft picks in return, because this is a younger team that has a lot of potential. Obviously, De'Aaron Fox and Marvin Bagley. Marvin Bagley was having problems this season just in terms of being able to play. It was just one injury after another. He'd get a couple of games and just having more injury issues. But, his potential is still there. It's not unchanged. He's just, he's got to stay healthy at this point. He was number three pick in that draft.
Number two. He's number two.
Yeah. Okay. And, guys like Harry Giles or Rashawn Holmes, they're not bad role players at all. Bogdan, obviously phenomenal. Bielitsa, fine. Harrison Barnes does fine. They have the right pieces to try to make something work. It's just everyone wants the Heat culture for a reason. Like the Kings would love to have that culture right now. If everyone's buying into the system, playing team ball, and Luke Walton's able to be more of a player's coach, they'd be fine. But I just don't see that happening. And maybe that's just because the Kings have had a history with, not drafting well, for one, which has been a lot of their sources of problems over the last decade. But also, some of that goes along with, having bad culture there. Even if sometimes their picks can look bad in retrospect because they're not able to get them to buy into the system or maximize their potential in whatever system they have. And so a lot of that comes down to the front office, in my opinion. And you can't bank on any of that changing anytime soon. So I don't know. They're kind of in a weird position, but, I think De'Aaron Fox did elevate his game to another level this season, which was great to see. And if, Marvin Bagley can stay healthy this season, I don't see why they can't be fighting for that last spot. Just it all comes down to Luke Walton, in my opinion, if he can get his players to buy in or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Luke Walton, without a doubt, should be fired, because it wasn't just like a individual player that sort of regressed. I feel like this whole roster sort of took that step back, and I think that's when it's on the coach. I typically am a person that I'm like, well, the coach, at the end of the day, it's the players that are playing, not the coach. And I have to take a step back on that with this team, because, they have the talent to do this. I think De'Aaron Fox is an excellent point guard in this league. I'd love to see him take that next step, maybe be that 23, 24, maybe 25-point scorer. I think he can do that. He's a great player. I'd love to see Marvin Bagley to avoid those injuries. I think he's a nice player. I don't think he's going to be amazing, but I do agree the Buddy Hield controversy is just so odd. It's just a weird thing. I mean, I agree with him. I mean, I know he's playing a little bit better off the bench, but the dude's averaging 19 points a game. He needs to be starting. He deserves the starting spot on that team, and I think it is going to cause some internal conflict that it already has. I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's some sort of trade pack comes their way this offseason, especially teams looking to maybe get over that hump. I mean, I think one team that might be particularly interesting is if the Bucks were able to sort of swing something to get Buddy Hield. I think that would, to me, if they could have a Buddy Hield, Chris Middleton, Giannis, that to me is the title contending team. I've said this a lot on this channel, especially when we did our Panic and Persist series, that I think the Bucks need to be panicking right now because I think they need to make a big move because there's so many other teams that I think are slightly above them for that championship contention. And I think Buddy Hield is a massive upgrade. And so that'd be a really nice pickup for them. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Buddy Hield go just because of the way the Kings are treating him. It's the Kings' fault. It ain't Buddy Hield. That man deserves to be competing for something. He's an excellent player. And so, I think the Kings they're just in a weird spot. They got the talent to do this. I'd like to see some of their other players sort of just step up and fill in the roles, fill in the gaps, start playing a little bit better, have a better defense. But, I mean, Luke Walton has just a terrible track record at this point of just being a horrendous coach. I mean, he's a bad coach. And if I were the Kings, I mean, there's other coaches still available right now that they could sort of go out and pursue. There's been a lot of new coach hirings this offseason. If I were them, I would be looking in that market because I think a good, strong coach is going to put this team back in that playoff contention where they were last year and give them that opportunity to fight for that 8 seed.
I mean, in terms of trades, if they're getting Buddy Hield off their payroll, because, I mean, they're paying him a lot of money. And what would you think? I know we're going to talk about them next, but either DeMar DeRozan or LaMarcus Aldridge, kind of, assuming some of that payroll and, being a more veteran presence to help try to rally that team around and just, get them to buy into a system. Like, I'm just trying to think of, like, who they could potentially be going after that would most likely be available that can, bring them a little bit more veteran presence in the locker room and help them potentially buy in.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't love like a DeMar or LaMarcus just because, one, I'm not a fan of DeMar's game at all. That's just personal opinion. I don't think if I'm a team, I'm not trying to go get DeMar DeRozan on my roster. And then I think LaMarcus Aldridge would just clash Marvin Bagley's ability to play. And so, but I think that's a good point. I think some sort of veteran presence would be a really crucial part of this roster. I'm not sure how it would work out contract-wise, but we kind of talked about this player earlier, and I think this team is, if they continue with their small ball Houston, I think a Covington pickup might be really nice in Sacramento because the Rockets are going to be looking to add more three-point shooters. I mean, the small ball has been proven to sort of work, but I think their biggest issue is the fact that, yes, they have good three-point shooters, but they don't have elite three-point shooters. That's why it's not working. And so if they want to continue this for another year, which who knows what's going to happen there, but if they decide to do that, I think they should try and go get some snipers like a Bertans, a Buddy Hield, those types of players. I think that's where they need to focus and sort of upgrade their shooters. So just another point that I was just thought of it. I think a good coaching pickup for this roster, D'Antoni. I don't think that'd be bad at all. I think he has that playoff sort of presence. I know he's a coach, not a player, but I think he would be a nice pickup. I think he would really unlock De'Aaron Fox's ability to play. It'd almost be a Steve Nash sort of thing. I think if they did that, they would try to sort of bring some more shooters into that roster. I think that could be a really, really nice way to sort of break up this team a little bit and sort of try and do something new, do something different, and see if that's going to work for them and see if that can get them in that playoff contention.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where Mike D'Antoni ends up for sure. Because, I mean, he's one of the more competent coaches in the entire league, and is anything that he tries, like, he's always known for, like, trying new different things. But usually they work to some degree. It's just, how much they succeed is just, kind of comes down to the players and if they're buying in or not. And so, maybe if they do have a coaching change and, D'Antoni could be the guy just because he has more experience and, has kind of had a track record of, different things that he's implemented. You might not love it, but it works one way or the other. And so the players might be able to recognize that and rally around whatever wild analytics that, they want to run with and try to, get this team over the hump. But, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Who are, off the top of your head, you don't happen to know, like, what teams still are looking for coaches that don't have coaches?
So I mean, Houston, technically, they're going to be looking for here. Let me hold on. I have all the teams here, so I can look through them. So Houston, OKC filled their coaching spot yet?
No.
So OKC, no. New Orleans did. So we got Houston, OKC, Cleveland maybe, because I'm pretty sure they just had their assistant fill in as an interim head coach, I believe. But they might promote him full time. Chicago's filled.
I know the Pacers just got filled this week too.
Yeah, Pacers got filled this week as well. Yeah, and the Brooklyn's filled, Philadelphia filled. So yeah, I guess it would just be Houston and what's the other team I said? Why am I blanking?
OKC.
OKC, thank you.
Yeah. So that's just that's interesting to me because I feel like, yeah, I know the D'Antoni thing kind of happened later after some of the coaching vacancies were filled. But, I mean, like, where does he end up, you think?
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, it sounds like it's kind of just the Thunder, which I don't hate that at all. Like,
well, I've also heard rumors that he might go and try and be he might be an assistant for Doc Rivers out in Philadelphia.
Okay, that is nice because actually before Doc Rivers like officially got hired, I was very much in the belief that somehow, some way, if D'Antoni and his wild visions and thoughts were able to like find his way over to the 76ers, that could be magical because they haven't really been able to find a perfect system to get Joel and Ben to work on the court effectively. And I definitely think that D'Antoni could have some dream one night and, have an awakening and get those two to like have a system and a roster composition in which they're able to maximize their, their talent together on the court and not blow that up because I don't think they should blow it up, but I also don't think Doc Rivers alone is able to. Yes, he's a good coach. He's very competent, has a lot of, playoff experience, but I don't necessarily think that he's able to devise a lot of schemes to work around like unique players, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think if there's any coach that's going to be able to figure out an offense that works in Philadelphia, it's definitely D'Antoni.
Yeah, I agree.
And if he can't do it, I think that's when it's time to say this ain't it. Let's break this up.
I just want to see what he comes up with for the 76ers.
I bet it's something crazy.
Yeah.
I almost hope that happens now because that would be really entertaining to see how that gets played out.
Oh, absolutely. And they have like a decent analytics team. That's the only – I feel like the only caveat with D'Antoni going anywhere is they have to have a somewhat competent like analytics department. Because I know that's been the wave like ever since, 2005 and kind of the rise of like some of these, more computational analytics. But some teams definitely just don't have as good of analytics departments as others. And D'Antoni obviously would prefer to be with the one that does because he likes exploiting those weird stats, devising new schemes around it. And I know the Philadelphia 76ers have a good analytics department and team, but that's why I was kind of hesitant to say that he would potentially end up with the Sacramento Kings, because I know they don't. So
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and move up into the 11th seed in the West. So we got the San Antonio Spurs. So what sort of moves are you making this offseason?
the move is to hit that reset button, baby. They should have done it last season. They need to find a way to get DeMar and LaMarcus Aldridge off their payroll and, get some more draft picks in return. I don't know if that's going to happen this season, but that's what needs to happen for this team, because yeah, they can continue to just try to scrap and get an eight seed, but they're not anywhere near championship caliber at this point. And they've kind of outlived, the whole, Tim Parker, Mono Ginobili, and Tim Duncan era, and kind of just lingered in that like lower playoff hunt for too long, in my opinion, when they could be making use of, just acquiring more assets, because they're a franchise that has drafted very well whenever they have higher draft picks and can hit on those draft picks very frequently. Like them and the Celtics are two teams that wherever they're at in the draft, whoever they end up taking, you're like, oh man, like everyone was thinking about them wrong, because these teams draft well and they know how to scout their players for sure. And so outside of Lonnie Walker, I will say he's been kind of one of the weaker, Spurs pick of the last like 20 years or so. He had a lot of hype coming out of Miami, but I don't know. I mean, they do have some nice young pieces in Derek White, DeJounte Murray, Patty Mills isn't necessarily young, but he's still nice. Trey Lyles has kind of developed more and more, and he's been, someone that can be an integral role player to this team if they do hit that reset button. But even Keldon Johnson, not horrible in his first year. But just in general, like I just struggle to see a reason behind not hitting that reset. And I know they haven't yet. And I think a lot of that probably comes down to just having Pop as a coach, and Pop just doesn't want to go through that. And so they're kind of in a weird position just because Pop has been their coach forever, and they have that loyalty factor with him, and they're going to want to fight for him. But I don't know. I know Bill Self has been linked with potentially filling Greg Popovich's shoes whenever he leaves. They have connections. They have been linked for a long time.
That would be very interesting.
Bill Self used to be his assistant coach. But, at this point, also to escape some of the NCAA controversy and allegations that is percolating around Kansas and, some of that type of stuff, I think if they did, they couldn't just do Greg Popovich dirty at this point, especially with how much I don't know. This whole team just is predicated around what they do with Greg Popovich and, like, how long he wants to coach there. I think they're going to let him ride out for as long as he wants, but at this point, I don't know why he hasn't, moved on.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think they need to try and get DeRozan and Aldridge off that roster. So it's gonna be so tough, especially DeRozan, as I talked about before. The dude's just not good. He can put like 20 points a game or whatever. Just like he's not someone teams are gonna actively look to add to that roster. And so who's going to want to take him in a trade? I don't really know who. And I do think a reset is definitely needed, because this team's they're not going anywhere. They're really not. And so I don't think they have the young right now that can grow and develop into like a great team. Like I genuinely think they either need to go trade or go back to the draft and get those young assets, because who on their roster right now would you be like, oh, that's our franchise player for the next 8 years? There's no one. Patty Mills, no. I would still say no. He's a nice player. I don't think it can be a franchise player. I think there's multiple tiers between him and their franchise player, and I think they don't have that guy yet. And in my opinion, when you don't have that guy, that's when you need to really take a step back and say, if we can't get this person in free agency or trades, we got to reset. And so, because otherwise, what are you doing? I mean, at that point, you're literally just in limbo, as we kind of said all day. Like, you're kind of just circulating there, doing nothing. You're not getting a good draft pick. You're not making it out of the first round. No one cares. No one cares if you make the playoffs. They care if you win the championship. And so so at the end of the day, I think hitting that reset and really trying and going after top tier prospects. I'd love to see Anthony. I mean, obviously, I doubt this happens, but Anthony Edwards here would be awesome. I think he would work really well in the San Antonio Spurs culture. I think I'd love to see him develop his game here because I think it would kind of help work out some of the issues he had in his college, some of the weaknesses that kind of been brought up about him. But I don't see the Spurs kind of trading up like that. Just not their style, in my opinion. So I don't know. We'll see. I do agree, though. I think a reset is definitely what needs to happen. I think getting DeRozan and Aldridge and getting a bunch of picks back, because at the end of the day, I trust their ability in the draft to go and select great guys, international guys especially. I know the next couple of years, the international draft is supposed to be really, really spectacular. And so I think that's something if I were them, I'd try and really, really focus on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's go ahead and do the 10th seed in the Western Conference, the Phoenix Suns. A little, I don't know, bubble run you can call it, a little 8-0. We got, want to point him out there? We got a little boy there, little Devin Booker. It's a little shot. So, yeah, Davis, what are you doing this offseason?
They need to stay the course. Like, I do think this is an attractive location for a free agent at this point. They seem just like they're one piece away from kind of being able to go on a Denver Nuggets type of run in the playoffs and, make it like exceed expectations. Although, yes, they were phenomenal in the bubble. They won all 8 of their games. I still think next season, I don't know if that's going to be there night in, night out. I do think it's very valuable to see because these were the most meaningful games Devin Booker's ever played. And he stepped up in those roles and thrived. So their goal needs to be to try to sign one more piece and get into the playoffs. I'm definitely not someone who's really sold on Ricky Rubio, their point guard. I think if I was them, I'd be looking to shop him around and then use the draft to try to pick one of these point guards up and run with that. But I just think anytime, like, I don't know. I just feel like he makes a lot more turnovers in like meaningful minutes than most players. And also with a guy that you can't knock down a three for a point guard to save his life, like it just makes the defenses collapse on the other players a lot more and kind of limits it whenever he's on the court. And so I understand he has good vision. He puts up a lot of assists and has surprisingly sneaky amount of steals. But at the same time, like, I don't know, he's not someone that's going to help them get over the hump. He's really not. And maybe I just am a little bit biased and I just don't think his game fits in the modern NBA as well as a lot of these younger point guards that are, kind of killing it. But, Ayton was developing fine. I think he's still, deserving of that number 1 pick at this point and hasn't really proved anyone otherwise. He's still continued to elevate his game every night on the court. But I don't know. I think what they end up doing with Kelly Oubre could be someone that, teams could be looking at and saying, okay, we'll get him off your hands because there's a lot of potential there for the future. He's a good developing asset and he becomes better and better each season. And teams are willing to probably pay him a big bag. And, as much as he does for that Phoenix offense, I still think that, maybe he's not the perfect guy in their system to be able to, continue to try to make a full season put together where they're able to go and, get a good enough record to make the playoffs. Like, I think he's good. I mean, obviously he went to Kansas, so he couldn't be bad, but at the same time, I think teams are valuing him a lot higher than what the Suns are currently getting night in and night out of him, specifically within their system. And so those are kind of the two kind of players, Ricky Rubio and Kelly Oubre, that I'd be looking to kind of make some changes with for your roster composition to try to get some, a younger point guard through the draft, and then, some better role players to kind of help that system thrive a little bit more. Because I don't think we have any problems with Cam Johnson or Mikal Bridges, or, obviously no problems with Devin Booker and no problems with DeAndre Ayton. So, like, you got four guys right there that are guys that you can kind of build your franchise around and are young guys. And so they're not in any problems, but I don't know if they can make the playoffs next season. I really don't. Like, as good as they were in the bubble, I don't think it's sustainable.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Suns 8-0 run was a fluke, honestly. I think they can be an entertaining team to watch, but the West is so competitive, and there's just so many teams that are just, at the end of the day, they're better than them. The Suns just are not good enough. I do agree. I think point guard's the one spot where they can upgrade. I know in our mock draft we have RJ Hampton going there. I think that'd be a nice pickup. I think he's someone that can develop well alongside Devin Booker. I also would not be surprised to try and maybe see him move up in the draft, maybe get a little bit higher point guard. I know we have at 6 to the Hawks, we have Tyrese Halliburton. We have him going there. I wouldn't be surprised to maybe see the Suns try and move up and go get him. I do agree. I think a draft point guard is a very, very key point for them this year, something I highly expect them to do. But at the end of the day, I think it's just I like Kelly Oubre in that offense. I think he works well personally. I just think they need to continue grow and develop, and they really need to. I think they need to work out their bench a little bit more. Yeah, they were fun and all to watch when they went 8-0 in their little fluke run in the bubble, but there's a reason why they were where they were with their record, because they were terrible all year. And so I think their bench was a really weak spot for them. I think going out, filling out that bench, trying to go get some role players to really boost that, I think that would help them, because I think their starting lineup's very nice. I mean, you got DeAndre Ayton, Baines is still on their roster, and I think he works a little well with there. You got Devin Booker. It's their bench to me. It's just really lackluster, and that's where I would look to improve heavily. Whether that's free agency, trades, all that sort of thing. I don't have any specific players in mind, but just going out and getting just a scorer. That's what they need. They need someone that can help put the ball in the hoop when Devin Booker's out on the floor, outside of their starting roster, of course, because I think DeAndre Ayton's going to take that next leap next year. I honestly expect him to average over 20. Probably he averages 11.5 boards right now. I think around there, maybe he gets up to 12, 13. I expect him to be a really elite rebounder in the NBA. But I kind of want him to move into that 20 point per game. I'd love to see him shoot a little bit better from 3 going into next season. So I just think for them, I think they're 2 years off from, maybe 3 off from like getting the playoffs. I think it's probably going to be 2. I don't think next year they're going to make it, but I think the year after, that's their opportunity. I think that's when those top tier teams, maybe like the Warriors or things like that, are going to start to kind of get out of the playoff contention as their best players get older and things like that. And so that's where I kind of see the Suns moving, is just stay the course, continue to grow, continue to develop, pick up the pieces you need. I think point guards, as we said, the one spot where they can really, really make a big upgrade. And so that's what I kind of want them to do in this offseason.
What about in terms of like a potential trade target? What would you think about them going after Victor Oladipo?
I just don't know if Victor Oladipo would necessarily fit with Devin Booker. I don't think it would fit. I mean, what does Victor Oladipo do? What's he best known for? Scoring. I mean, that's what they want him to do. They want him to score.
Didn't you just say they need another scorer?
I said they need another bench scorer. I think that's what they need to get. I think they need someone off the bench that's going to be able to help whenever starters are on the floor, because I think their starters do a great job. I mean, Ayton and Kelly Oubre both average 18. Devin Booker's like 23, 24. I can't recall off the top of my head, but I think their their starting five is nice. I think they're solid. I just think their bench is where they need to kind of improve pretty heavily. I just think it's a rather lackluster bench. I don't think they have any guys that would just be like, hey, we need you to score 15, 16 points a night off the bench for us. I don't think they have that guy for them. And I think that's where they need to look to improve. I think free agency might be a good target for them. Trades as well, maybe trying to get rid of a maybe they could do like a Ricky Rubio and maybe a pick. Go get a
Dennis
really
Schroeder
smart bench guy. I was about to say that. A Dennis, like that would be a nice pickup. And then go draft. We said RJ Hampton. Go get RJ Hampton. Have RJ Hampton start at point guard. Have Dennis Schroeder come off the bench. That's a nasty team. Yeah. That team is good. And so that's where I think they need to improve. Go get your six man. That's what I should say. Go get your six man. That's what they need.
No, I agree. And I do think Cam Johnson will also be a player that's making a big step next season.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just someone that every single game it seemed like he was improving as a player and was becoming more cerebral, understanding how the NBA schemes are working on the defensive side. And he's just like, I don't know. I have faith that he's going to end up being a very, very good player in this league.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and do our last team, the Western Conference. So we got the Memphis Grizzlies. So just barely missed out on that playoff spot this year. So Davis, what are you going to be doing with this team?
I don't know. They're a tricky team because I think there's a lot of teams in the West that are rising up, and not that the Grizzlies are necessarily going to be trending downwards. But I do think they definitely overachieved this last season based on, kind of their roster composition. And I think Jonas Valanciunas was a very, very good player throughout the regular season, was kind of an anchor of that offense sneakily. But obviously, I mean, they have a lot of good young players, Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr., Ja Morant, Dylan Brooks, Kyle Anderson even. I don't know. They have pieces. They do. But I do think that Jonas Valanciunas, they might need to be looking to move him elsewhere. Not that he, like I said, not that he wasn't good within their system. And maybe he's just more of like a Steven Adams, bruiser guy that can, just kind of be the center that they have on their payroll for the next however many seasons. But at the same time, trying to get someone a little bit younger than Valanciunas to help fit that timeline and allow Jaren Jackson Jr. to play a little bit more center down low. And because they also they got Justice Winslow. I don't know if he's sticking around after this season or not. That's kind of a weird situation at the end of the season. But I don't know. I don't expect him to make the playoffs. And I think I know they were close, obviously, this season, kind of ended up blowing it in the bubble. But I don't know. They're a team that's 4 or 5 years out from being in championship contention. And a lot of that just comes down to letting their young guys play together as much as possible. And so I don't know.
Yeah, I think the only little areas I've improved, I like Valanciunas on this roster. I think I'm the coach. More of what I'd be focusing on is more of reducing his role. I'd like to see Brandon Clark get a lot more minutes on the floor, especially with Ja Morant. I think they're a great combo together. And so I think just reducing Valanciunas' role on that roster. But I still think he brings a lot of value whenever they play. One person I like to watch him as a player, but if I'm the GM of the Grizzlies, I may be looking to get rid of him, and that's Dylan Brooks. I mean, the dude, he reminds me of Kyle Kuzma. I mean, if you give him the ball, he's going to shoot it. I mean, that's what he's going to do. And I like to see he feels like he always has green light. He's going to be go, go, go. He's very competitive. He's fun to watch. But the dude, he's so efficient. I mean, I got his stats up right now. 40.7% from the field, 35% from three, which isn't bad. His 3-point's not bad, but finishing around the rim is just horrendous. He takes a lot of bad shots, and I'd rather have Ja Morant take my bad shots than Dylan Brooks. And so if I'm them, and I just think Dylan Brooks is someone that other teams might look kind of highly on because he is a nice player. He's averaging 16 a game. He's a nice, good role player. There might be other teams that might be a little high on him. Maybe do a little trade there. Maybe go out and get a little wing. I think a wing might help them. Someone to play alongside John Morant. But at the end of the day, it's just this team's so young. They overachieved very, very heavily this year. And so I think the fact that they were even in playoff contention should be a big win for them. John Morant needs to develop. He needs to do a lot better with handling the ball. He had a lot of turnovers. I think he needs to really reduce on that end. But other than that, I mean, this is a fun team to watch this year. I couldn't believe for the first time ever, I was like, dude, I want to watch a Memphis Grizzlies game. They were fun to watch. John Morant was a very key piece of that. But I think it's just minuscule changes for me at the end of the day. Just they need to play together. John Morant needs to just continue to grow and develop. And then I would just more focus on giving Brandon Clark some more minutes. I think he can be a really, really key piece for them. He could be, in my opinion, like a Draymond Green for this team. I mean, he's so good defensively. He could play that small ball five. I mean, lob threat. He's a good scorer down low. I think he's a really nice piece for this team. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on. Maybe if they want to do something crazy, maybe move away from Dylan Brooks. I just don't like that he takes away so many shots from my star players and Jaren Jackson Jr., John Morant. That's where I want those shots to go to.
Yeah, for sure. And someone else that they need to try to be getting on the court a little bit more, in my opinion, is Grayson Allen. I know he was getting off an injury, but whenever he came back from his injury at the end of the season, he was playing good ball. And especially with all the eyes on Ja, that just opens up a lot for good three-point shooters. And he's always been a chippy defender, someone that brings a lot of intensity on both ends of the courts, and
a lot of tripping.
Yep. But in general, I think he's someone that will thrive in a role if he's given more opportunities, or he's just given higher level of responsibility for the team to try to take his actions into the next level. I think he can do that. I don't know if he will. But at the end of the day, I think this Grizzlies team is, they're not worrying in their front office meetings and stuff like that. Their fans are probably pretty happy with how things ended up. Yeah, it was a bummer they didn't end up making the playoffs, but before the season, no one expected them to. So, I mean, you can't really be too upset there. And they have a lot of – they've been drafting well recently. They just really have. And so that's good on them. And, it hurts not having their draft pick for this upcoming – their first-round draft pick this season that they traded away to the Celtics, who, surprise, surprise, Celtics have 3 first-round picks this season again. But, I mean, yeah – I don't know. That's kind of why I'm saying, though, that they should maybe be looking to move away from Valanciunas, because if you're saying they should be giving him a decreased role at the expense of the younger players, well, then at that point, if he's getting $17 million on their payroll and you're trying to decrease his role when his role whenever he's playing is very good, that's just kind of a sign for me that, you should maybe try to move on and get some draft picks, or kind of, get a younger piece to, that you can be trusting to be on the floor and kind of measure up on that time frame. But
yeah, I just think that, I mean, as we both agree, Valanciunas brings a lot of good benefits to this roster. I just think that I'm not saying it never hurts to have so many good young assets and good pieces. I just think that having Valanciunas on the roster and the benefits he can bring is better than maybe the 1 or 2 draft picks you get in return for him. I don't think that, I think they already have the good pieces they need. And I think Valanciunas can sort of just help push them, be that veteran leadership in the locker room. And as we kind of said earlier, if the team is full of young guys, it's okay to overpay for maybe someone that maybe not deserve it. And so I don't think the $17 million for him is the end of the world, because at the end of the day, I don't think another team is going to want to take on that amount of money for what he brings to the table. I mean, he's a nice player, but I mean, as you said, he's like a Steven Adams sort of player. He's a bruiser. I think he's a little bit better offensively than Steven Adams, but I think he does fit well with this roster. I think for me, I would want his role to almost be like Zubac was for the Clippers a little bit. I want him to start. I want him to play 25 minutes a night. And then I want Brandon Clark to finish games. I think them finishing out with Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr., I want to see that happen a lot more often in games. and then Valanciunas. But now, if they get an amazing trade package coming their way, if they can get 2 draft picks and like a good young piece now, I would do that trade. I think that's a fair trade for them.
So I've been looking at like potential players that they might like, they're just like might be available on teams. And I know we talked about Buddy Hield earlier, and it seems like with both those teams, they'd be getting not only a play style that would be more complementary in those systems, but also someone that's, fitting also what they're looking for in the locker room a little bit more. So, I mean, if obviously you could have, Valanciunas for Buddy Hield and then have like some other pieces to work out the contracts, but their contract situation isn't that much of a difference anyway to begin with. And, getting another just nice shooter around John Morant would be huge. Buddy Hield's one of the best shooters in the league. And as much as I'd like to say Grayson Allen can develop into that role, I mean, there's still a lot of question marks there. And so Buddy Hield is more proven in that specific role. And also what we were talking about, how the Sacramento Kings need a more veteran presence in the locker room, someone that's just been around the league and it goes hard every single night to kind of help them buy into that system. Is that not Valanciunas? I mean,
Yeah,
you don't
exactly.
know, and especially if you're the Kings and you don't know about there's a big question mark around Bagley's health and, if he's going to be suiting up the entirety of next season. Valanciunas doesn't miss a lot of games either.
Yeah.
And so you can kind of have him as a backup and someone that, if you're having Buddy Hield come off the bench, why don't you have Valanciunas coming off the bench assuming Bagley is healthy and playing and starting this season. So that's just something that seems a little interesting to me. If I'm both teams, I would consider that.
Yeah, I think something else that would pique my interest more is if the Grizzlies were able to not only get off. I mean, if they could package Valanciunas and Dillon Brooks, because I think Buddy Hield would sort of fill the role that they kind of asked Dillon Brooks to do. Maybe package both of them away and then get a little bit more in return from the Kings. In addition to Buddy Hield, I think that would be a really nice package deal that would work for both teams. Because that allows bringing in that veteran leadership, but also kind of bring a secondary scorer. Not saying Dillon Brooks ain't the most efficient, but he does bring that culture. He talks about being just very tenacious. He's not a talented player, but he grinds it out every night, which is one of the reasons why I like watching him play. And I think both those players sort of bring that mindset, which would help the Sacramento Kings a lot. It's one of the things they're desperately needing.
Absolutely. Another guy that the Kings might be able to go after is Goran Dragic, just in terms of veteran presence, a six-man kind of guy.
That would be very interesting. Absolutely.
I don't know.
Dragic is a free agent this year, correct? I want to say he is.
I think so.
I believe
either that or he has an expiring contract. I'm looking. Yeah, no, he's a free agent this offseason.
I was going to say, I thought he was. So, yeah, that's going to be another interesting one to see kind of where he goes this offseason because, I mean, if he leaves Miami, I wouldn't be surprised to see Miami maybe –
or the Suns.
Yeah.
I think him and –
Dragic to the Suns. Go back home. Go back home to the Suns.
Yeah. Why not?
Would you be okay with Ricky Rubio coming off your bench?
I don't want Ricky Rubio on my team. No matter what team I'm on, I don't want him on my team. I just have a big disdain for him. I don't know what it is. It's just it seems like whenever he's dictating the tempo, like in the backcourt, he's just slowing down the game so much. And with such like a high potential scoring offense and a team like the Suns, it just seems like they need to be going downhill more. I feel like he's holding them back. Like single-handedly, he's holding them back. They're better with it when he's not playing on the court. And like even their second units, if Ricky Rubio's running with their second guys off the bench, they just also look worse. Like anytime, I've never seen a team where Ricky Rubio gives me faith that he is the right guy to be on that team.
I mean, I think he does bring value to like the way he runs the offense. I think in the half-court setting he does well, but I do get what you mean. He does often slow it down a lot, and especially in today's game with how important it is for your point guard to be a scorer. I think he does. He's very lackluster in that category as a dominant scorer, especially with shooting. And so, I mean, I think he would be fine as your backup point guard if you have another good scorer with him coming off of your bench.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So, all right. Well, that wraps up our little series talking about all these teams in the East and West that didn't make the playoffs and sort of the next steps that they needed to do to kind of move forward into the future and just become a better team. So, yeah, peace.
Peace.